Hello there, Internet. Welcome to another episode of Weekly Art Tips. I'm your host, Ando, and today we are going to be doing another critique video. And we're going to be looking at Arlie-Hime. And as always, please forgive my terrible pronunciation of pretty much every word I utter. So sometimes I can't even say English things. And grammar. What is grammar? Anyways, let's dive right in. So the first image we're going to be looking at is Reikagu Speed Paint. And let's pull my little pen tool up here. And the first thing I really noticed about this image is that the colors are very rich, and I really like that, especially these nice, like, colorful nebulas in the background, and this really nice lens flare. As far as the form of the figure goes, this is very well executed. It looks very three-dimensional in most places. I really like the shading that you used on your character. And also, the use of fabric is very lovely in this shirt and her shorts over here as well. I have to say that the way that you put the shading on this sleeve is just super gorgeous. I love the way that the shadow kind of cuts into this very bright white, and I personally think that that's like probably my favorite part of the image. I know that kind of it sounds kind of weird, but I tend to like zone in on a few spots of an image that I really think stand out, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this image is just the attention to fabric is very nice, especially right here. One thing I will say about your highlighting, that it's very well placed in the character's hair and her clothing, especially on the backs of the legs here, and this kind of bluish highlighting here as well. That's very well executed. But when it comes to these kind of fabric-y wings in the back, I feel like the lighting is a little bit less powerful than it is on the figure itself. I feel like the lighting is not 100% correct, because you have these really bright highlights in her shirt and on her legs and in her hair, but you don't really have the same amount of lighting that would come into this if this is in the same space or same area. So I would recommend kind of looking at where your light source is coming from on these parts especially, and even though this side is not technically facing the light source, you would see a bit of a halo kind of coming in through the sides. So I would recommend kind of going in there and maybe looking at a few studies of fabric in kind of a similar situation. It would be kind of difficult to find this exact kind of reference, but I'm sure that you can find a couple of images and make it up yourself. But other than that, I really don't see very many issues with color or lighting. One thing I will say that I really like about the way that you used colors in this is that you have these really bright color spots that come in here, and they're very interesting because it's not something that you would expect. So I actually really like that about this, is that you have these interesting highlighting colors that are coming out of just spectrums that don't really match the situation, but it adds to the image a lot, so I think that's really cool. One other thing that I liked is the fact that you also added a lens flare kind of coming off her necklace, so that's really neat as well. And I think the last thing I'll really say about lighting is I feel like there should be a little bit, just a very light amount, very subtle, kind of coming in on the cheekbone, because it's a little flat on her face. So just a little bit of a highlight coming in will really add a lot more dimension there. But other than that, everything else looks very 3D. It looks very well thought out. Anatomy-wise, the only issue I can personally see is that this knee kind of goes in a little bit too much if her leg is going down this way. So maybe just pulling that out just a tad will make it look a lot more lined up. But other than that, everything looks really spot on this piece. And as far as the background goes, like I said, I love the rich colors. this very, very wavy highlighting off of this planet on the bottom is very cool. And especially like how it wasn't just one color, you also brought in this kind of blue spectrum, so that's very, very well done. So that's all I'm going to say about this piece. Good work. Alright, the next one we're going to be looking at is New Challenger Approaching. What I wanted to say about this piece is that I think it's really cool that it is a 100% different style than the first piece. And I think that there's kind of this misconception, especially for beginning artists, that you need to develop a 100% unique style to you. And while there are a few artists that are specifically known for their style and they're sought out like by employers for their style, most artists that work freelance or for studios, they are more likely to get jobs if they have a flexible style, or not even really a style, just like that they're flexible and they can emulate a whole bunch of styles and just go in many different directions. So I think it's really cool that the pieces that you submitted are very, very different from each other, so that's really awesome. What I really like about this type of style is that the sketch quality, like you have line work in this one, and it's got a really nice natural look to it. Everything looks very deliberate and I love it. I like the sketch pen that you kind of used for your line work. I like how the opacity changes. You can kind of see like a bit more of a sketchy quality. It's a lot less painterly than the last image, but it still looks very characteristic. I love just kind of these chunky black lines that you have, especially like in the hair, so that's really cool. And also, same as the last time, you also have these really, really lovely highlights in the hair. This area right here especially, I just love how these kind of yellow highlights come out. It's really, really nice. One thing that is kind of bothering me a bit, this is my main suggestion for like changing in this image, I believe you're missing a thumb. Or I suppose that it could be that this is the thumb here and then these fingers are kind of moving back in space, in which case you're missing a pinky, but you are missing a finger on this hand. So that's like the main thing that is really bothering me about this image. But that's like if you change one thing on this image, that would be the thing to change. It's just to add that extra finger in there. Everything else that I'm going to be mentioning are going to be mostly nitpicks or just personal opinion, because I really love just kind of the design of this image. I like the posing. The background is really awesome in my opinion, just like this little mushroom pattern that you have, the very Mario mushrooms. And I really like how you kind of tied that in with the hat, because the hat matches. That's adorable. And then I also like the fact that instead of it just being like a solid pattern background, you also have this really cool blue, like blue diagonal line work, and then you even have it kind of moving into the pattern with these eraser marks. So that's really cool. I also like the text that you used. It's very 8-bit video game style text, and I think it works really well with just the composition and the idea behind this image. One thing that I would recommend changing about the text is right here. That's a little hard to read because the yellow that's coming in through the back is a little too close in tone to the white. So I would either add more blue there and just kind of scoot the eraser marks up a bit, or just even keep the eraser part over to this area and just not have it go through the words, because like when you read it from a distance, it might be a little bit harder to like tell the difference between the words in the background, but that's just very minor stuff. I'm really liking this kind of chunky cowl neck, turtleneck design that you have here. I like how it's not perfectly spherical. You have this nice little bump in it. That's awesome. I really like the fold in the shirt over here. I feel like maybe with the pants, attention to how the fabric would fold would be a little bit better, to just kind of have them going downwards instead of upwards, because I assume that these are supposed to be jeans, but the way that the fabric folds so drastically, it makes it almost look like sweatpants. So maybe look at a couple photo references of jeans to just kind of have an idea of how jean fabric folds. Actually, this past month in November, I went to CTNX, which is an animation expo, and I got to talk to a couple of artists that work in character like costume design, and they told me a lot of really interesting information about kind of designing clothing for characters, and they gave me a lot of pointers on just kind of varying up fabric, like folds even, would just kind of get a different feel for what kind of fabric your character is wearing. So that's actually a really, really good point, and I'm going to be trying to implement that in my own work a little bit more over time. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I wanted to share with you as well, is just kind of pay attention to how fabric lays, because I feel like the fabric that you used for the sweater and the hat are really spot on, but just the kind of jean fabric does not lie exactly like it does in this image. So other than that, when it comes to like the posing and the anatomy, I feel like the body is very three-dimensional. The arm moving back in space is pretty good, like pretty spot on. I can't really see anything that I would change aside from that hand. And this arm with the foreshortening. Foreshortening is very difficult to do, so I really applaud your foreshortening here. It looks pretty darn good. Maybe my only suggestion is that I feel like when it gets down to the elbow, it's a little bit too narrow, so maybe kind of building up this arm just a tad will really help that out. But other than that, the angle looks really correct. The size of the arm looks really correct. Your shoulders over here. So yeah, this looks pretty spot on, aside from the fact that it just is a little bit thin down near the bottom. So that's really awesome. When it comes to the leg, however, this one looks pretty darn accurate, because you have like the leg kind of moving back behind her body. But this leg over here, I feel like that is a bit too long. You'd probably end up seeing the foot around here, just from this angle, because the way that it's moving back in space, that even if this leg was completely parallel to the floor, you'd still see the foot show up a bit earlier than back here. So I would try shortening up this leg a bit. But really, other than that, I feel like the anatomy is really spot on. I like the dynamic movement that you have in this pose. Is very natural looking. I like how the hair kind of flows back in space, really cool. And then it also kind of swoops around and just brings you back into the composition again, so that's really awesome. Pretty much the only other thing I really want to mention about the pose is that it's really interesting how you have kind of this like really so the last thing I really want to mention is your coloring, which again is very, very nice. I like your really dramatic shadows that you have on the shirt, especially like under the hair, where you can kind of see exactly where the hair is lying. You have this nice shadow that shows underneath the pencil, so that's really cool. Definitely makes the pencil look like it is floating in midair, and is it looks like it is the correct distance away from where the shadow is versus where the pencil is. One thing that is a little weird is that with this very, very drastic shadow that's coming across her face, I feel like there would be a bit of that shadow under the nose as well. I understand that it's like a very, very slight nose. It's just like going to be a little bump. But you would still see a little bit of shadow under here, just in comparison to how heavy that shadow is on the side of her face. That's more of a personal opinion versus like a stylistic aspect of the image. So I would try seeing what it would look like with a little shadow under the nose, and if you don't like it, you don't even need to worry about that. That's just my personal opinion. So let's talk about color. I really like the color use in this image. It's very harmonious. I like how you have the reds that you added to the face. That's really cool. And you also added it to the skin, where it's just like a little bit of red to kind of add a bit more life to the image. Just kind of rosy cheeks, rosy nose, and then you also have that coming into the fingers as well, so it's not just like a pure peach skin tone. That's really neat. I like, this is very, very slight, but I like this little itty bitty green highlight that you added to her eye. That's really nice. Another thing that I like about the color use is just the fact that like the cell shading is also added. You added like a bit of like a gradient as well, so that's really cool. It's not like pure cell shading, but it's not very painterly either, so that's really neat. And then I also like the fact that to add more of a glow effect to the pencil, you changed the opacity of the line work and made it a bit more gray than the rest of the line work. So I think that is a really nice addition. And honestly, I can't think of anything else that I would really have to say about this image, aside from it is a very solid image and I really like it, especially the pose and expression, just very, very adorable, and I think it is awesome. So thank you so much for sending in work, and that was Arlie-Hime, so please go check out her work and show her a lot of love. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.